Howdy, folks. Thank you for coming out to this reading. We are so happy to have you. Caylin Capra-Thomas, of course, is a new favorite of mine and an old favorite of everyone I've told about that this reading was happening. And just so you know, we've got a few more events here at the library going into the evening. The evening events, of course, require $5 or your button. And then we wrap everything up at 7 p.m. at the Zach with Jamie Ford. We also have a variety of other poets. We're going to start off with Natalia Boise. Did I get it right? Excellent. She is part of our short work series, something new we are doing this year, and we are so excited to have her. Natalia.
Okay, so I'm going to be reading a couple of my original poems. None of these are published, but I printed off too many. If you would like to read some of them after, you're welcome to take one of these copies. And I'm part of a local poetry group called the Honeybee Poetry Society, or Honeybee Poets Society, and we all meet every once in a while to write poetry together, and so all of these poems have come out of that creative group. The first one is called In the North, and it's a read-in poem, so the title is In the North, and it reads into the poem. In the north, spring is like a revelation. Meadowlark longing, a siren call to storm. She holds a tune too brief, too staccato, and altogether fleeting. Genesis repeating, the origin of all things already known that a fern does not need to learn to photosynthesize to unfurl. Blossom in bramble, sidewalk crack symphony, the absolute joy, the reverence, unrelenting resilience, the tenacity of life, battered and worn as moon-driven shores, and still life says, I want more. The next one is called Woman of Many Colors. The title is inspired by one of my favorite songwriters, Courtney Marie Andrews, and the song is Woman of Many Colors. It's a wonderful song. If you haven't heard it, you should listen to it. So it was inspired by that song. I, that wild and rambling, that wind-swept willow rustle, a bone-rumbling rhythm remembered in a life before and after the rapture. I, a wet and waking babe, a wild tremor echoing, echoing, echoing. Waves crashing on your shore, a siren song wailing, I, silent meadows and warbling sparrows, sunlight breaking shadows on freshly dew-anointed grass, the northerly node on a queer compass pointing every which way and nowhere. I, reckless wanderer, virgin wine to your eyes, the wanton and feral chalice overfloweth. My body, somehow not the woods bequeath. And oh, the aching call of my distances, my depths it cannot reach. I, kaleidoscopic, shifting, a sieve, a sieve, a sieve. Refracting, I shatter sunbeams, prismatic, I quake, I pulse, I surrender, a wild and wandering woman. This next one is called Hannah, and it's inspired by one of my friends from the poetry group. Some women grasp at stars, hopes, and dreams. Some grope at breasts and scream, birthed by sunrise into wild unseen, a cup of black coffee, no sugar, but with cream. I, however, all wrapped up in sage and smoke, will smolder into the air and wisp away to the next faraway place. Some women paint themselves pink and purple and blue, and so do I, a canvas of queer hues. Tomorrow she'll wander into Rorschach's notebook and lick the place clean, leave the secrets she took. Oh, to taste your chaos as sweet and rancid as my own, and to paint it again with tender blood racing. She'll cascade like an earthquake and leave you unshaken, confused, awake, choked, and made of ribbons and thistles, as if chronic anxiety could have a flavor. Some women eat their words in great gulps. They unhinge jaws and swallow books whole, and I could read them like poetry. I could sing their song. All right. And this next one is called Mother. As a child, I laid down, pressing my cheek against the soft plush of my mother's belly. To me, she was a cloud, protective pillow, solace, and warmth. Later, when my hips spread and my body became ready to become someone's cloud, I learned I was responsible for her softness. That before I was in the world, she was so small, so much smaller than I. I grow soft and have no child to blame, but I still mourn that empty space once chasmed by the great void of a broken heart. How I hardened and lost so much and was no one's cloud. I grow and take her form, her crow's feet wrinkles and veined hands gifted to me. I hold her in softness. I see her beauty and in turn see mine. And then this last one I wrote fairly recently. I have been watering my garden at night, and that's become a very meditative process for me. So it was inspired by that. It's another read-in poem, so Have You is the title, and it reads in. Have you walked out into the full moon, insomnia-ridden, and let your feet hold the grass? Have you doused your night dress with the garden hose and thanked the stars for the feeling of enlivening cold in summer heat? Have you composed cricket symphonies, danced high and alive in a midnight downpour? Have you plucked succulent sunripe berries fresh till your fingers bleed with their juice, taken them whole in your mouth, savored the dirt? Have you porch sat idly for hours, greeted first-time friends? Have you baptized a stranger with I love you? Have you cried at sheer joy because you rope swung into adulthood and the splash feels warm for the first time? Have you seen your mother as a child, held her close, shivering in the wind, her skirt wet with river? Have you cast a net to the stars, fished the Milky Way, waded into constellation? Have you caught the new moon in Pisces? Have you stopped for a moment, betting your dreams on the yet-to-be, and instead laid them to sleep where your feet meet the forgiving earth? Have you left your heart to silence, to its bellowing call, laid space for birdsong in its wake? Thank you.
Hello. Thank you, Natalia. That was fantastic. My name is Philip Shaffer. I've been in Missoula for about 10 years. Moved here for the MFA program where I met Caylin, and we're now good friends who get the fortune of reading together to support her new book. I'm going to read just a few poems, and then I will introduce our premiere event. I'm going to read some poems that I've been working on recently that are coming from the premise that my wife and I, who's sitting right here, have been thinking, talking, and exploring the idea of having a baby. And I was mowing the lawn about a month ago and thinking about this unborn child that may or may not exist depending on if we're even capable of having a child. So that whole idea just kind of went rampant in my mind, and I decided to run with it and write these letters to an unborn child that that's not even an embryo or anything like that. It's just an idea. And so each poem is titled Lettered to Something. They're all letters to this invisible thing, but the title does not indicate that necessarily. The first one does. Letter to the Unborn. You do not yet live, and it is possible you never will. Still, I mow the lawn with your name under tongue, the letters pulsing together like a maraca of bees. I rub the magic 8-ball of my gut and pretend I am a mother. But the clouds read, better luck next time. I palm the handle of my hatchet and imagine us deep in the woods by a body of water so green you could dream up anything. Shaving kindling off the years, making memories we're bound to forget. I rest the god of my hand on your neck, silently show you how to blow a small galaxy of wind between your fingertips, how to turn thin air into energy. Our best conversations happen on days like this. Summer sun, a mirage of itself, gasoline on my wrists, wondering if you'll exist. Double-sided. Letter to Together Alone. You're nearly 3 in my mind, and I have you on my shoulders like a Greek myth on a trail by a creek in the mountains. I haven't hiked in years, and you want to cry, but even your acorn mind understands the job at hand. Your mother's in England again, and I feel responsibility like a mattress on my face. Maybe tonight I will share with you the secret of slicing open a hot dog, lining it with cheese, all the small pleasures of melt and char and mustard dripping on our knees. I'll spin a little early Merle, dance with you on my feet. Together we will make a call transcontinental, brush our teeth clockwise, and I'll dream it was all real with a miniature hand to squeeze. Letter to Time Unknown. I walk around town looking for interesting stones, river shrapnel, anything semi-natural I can convince you someday is supernatural. I want to take an arrowhead and carve the small watermelon of you out of your mother's belly. We're going to kill each other in the kitchen, the hospital, and it will be your fault. Know this now, I consider you a threat. But it takes 2 to tango, kiddo, and 12+ years from now when I receive a call from Officer Horsebreath about the egged house or knife-tucked truck tires, I will swear on her life that you were by my side, at home, building a UFO from little relics found in a shoebox in the garage from time unknown. Letter to Shared Apathy. It's raining bats and frogs in this movie theater soiree, and I have become popcorn butter magic. Something about plagues makes me want to buy an automatic BB gun. That way I can show you how to kill without hurting, or maybe the other way around. Teenagers are dyslexic, reptilian, dystopian. I open a bag of M&Ms and imagine your face bathed in chocolate at a party you're too young to attend. Whatever it is, don't do it alone. If it smells alien, it will feel alien. But fuck it, has to be better than human. How the hell do you parent someone who could also be a parent but isn't born yet? Questions for the before life XY files. Story of the moral is to take smarter drugs, visit a witch doctor more often than a hospital, and to appease your mother with a vegetable or 2. When you're too far gone to remember you still love us, read this letter, light a match and send us to the moon in flames. There's a certain solace to ending what you never thought you began. And this last one is called Letter to Hindsight in 2020. We played the conception game like we were in the middle of a hurricane. 8 bananas for dinner, went full bonobo. We dreamt our tiny apartment was an island, tiptoed around the lava kitchen tiles, drew a waterfall out of the clawfoot. There were moments we wanted it all to end, for this to be our awakening, our silence, an opera with a machine gun in its mouth. But we wanted you, too, not knowing who you were. Your strawberry pigtails, the microcosmic laugh that can grab a human heart and rip it like a phone book in half. We could feel a presence better than us, finally, until it became us. Your little spit-ups, toes the size of orange Tic Tacs, a distraction into another world. Truth is, we might have killed you by imagining you. Some days now we wake up, hot skin, tea kettling hot skin, and the fire goes eyeball white, blank as an EKG. The idea of the moment somehow always greater than the moment the ember floats away. Okay, and now I'm going to introduce Caylin. Oh, yes. Caylin Capra-Thomas is a poet, a really good poet. What makes her a really good poet, I will never fully know, but it's really obvious. What I do know is that Caylin's poems listen more than they speak. Her poems want to understand, want to learn, and want to grow in their experience of themselves. She even has a poem in her fabulous debut collection called Knowing. She ends this one, "Isn't it something to see for once what was coming until it overcame me, until I was overcome?" Caylin's voice collects authority with its precision and openness. She is not afraid to see rain on the way, open the door, and step outside. Her poetry wants to be overcome, and because of this, we are overcome with insight, introspection, and delight. I had the pleasure of attending grad school here at the University of Montana nearly a decade ago with Caylin, where she taught me as much as any poet or mentor ever has. And this little book she's about to read from is a culmination of her talent, hard work, and determination. Now I have the even greater pleasure to introduce her as a friend, a fierce poet, and an overall kick-ass human being. But before we hear her magic, I want to let everyone know her book, Iguana Iguana, is a must-read and for sale, and was published by Deep Vellum this spring. She has also been published in every journal out there, but most notably Pleiades, New England Review, 32 Poems, and Crazy Horse. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming the wonderful, the ecstatic, the loveliest ever.
Thank you, Phil. That was really lovely. Yeah, I don't really thank you. I'm not good at being tall. Never quite got the hang of it. Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Phil, once again. Yeah, can I have a copy of that to read sometimes when I am feeling low? And thank you to Natalia for opening up for us. That was also really a treat. Thanks to John Samuel Brown and the Montana Book Fest for having me today, and the wonderful volunteers who are keeping this festival running. You're doing an incredible job. I also want to thank the library for hosting us in this room. It's really too bad about the view. And Fact and Fiction for selling books out there, and to all of you for spending your Sunday fun day with poems. I know that you could have been doing literally anything else, so I really appreciate your presence here. So I'm going to read a number of poems from this book, my first book, Iguana Iguana. And I was on the plane here and I was thinking I wrote a lot of the poems in it here in Missoula, and I counted up the number of poems, and it turned out to be about a third of the book I wrote here in Missoula. So I wanted to read, especially from some of the poems that came out here. But I will start with the title poem, which has nothing to do with Montana. It's I wrote it in Key West, which is pretty much the opposite of Montana. I was at the studios of Key West, and I was learning to ride a bike for the first time at 30. I have a historically fraught relationship with things on wheels. Iguana Iguana, Key West. Things crawl over me here, no-see-ums and biting ants. They make me feel hospitable, like, at last, I am a good host. Stop itching, I tell myself. We have guests. What is a guest, if not something that takes a little bit of your life? In the cemetery where I practice pedaling, sailing circles around the dead, iguanas sunbake and scurry the white slabs, the green length of them defiant drapery in death's pale parlor. I'm told they're invasive. Even their taxonomy, iguana, iguana. It's too much. Too many iguanas. The William Carlos Williams of reptiles. Or the man my mother loved after my father, Jim James, who chugged caffeine-free Diet Pepsi and made his pecs dance, recited the 3 words of Italian he learned from Sylvester Stallone, ti amo and andiamo. He once argued with me over my stubborn belief that 10,000 was like the same thing as 1 million. I was never good with numbers. He was never good with kids. He built things and made my mother laugh. Maybe too much. Maybe for the wrong reasons. During cold snaps, the iguanas freeze and fall like stoned fruit from the trees, wake only once their core has warmed. I won't be here to see it. It's the off-season now, August, everything dank and hot-blooded, which is what I think my mother liked about Jim. Something raw about him. The pink scars where his own mother's boyfriend stubbed out cigarettes on his arms. Or how he called "Here, kitty, kitty" nightly into the dark after the cat ran away. She was a stray to begin with. We lured her into our lives with milk, named her Fitty Fat the kitty cat, let her eat and fuck and kill as much as she wanted. Litters of kittens and kibble and dead birds piling up. What else is there to say but everything we've said before, over and again? Iguana, iguana, Italian stallion, here kitty kitty, andiamo, Jim James. What is a child, if not something that takes a little bit of your life? He wasn't a bad man. He made my mother laugh. Window. So many friends I've caught beautiful, not knowing it, cursing me in the snow or fumbling shirtless through cabinets for the last sachet of tea. Their petulance an unlikely ornament. It is easier, I suppose, to wrap myself in myself, the root of us, alone, a lot. So I cook near naked by the kitchen window. I try so hard to get caught. But nobody looks up while they walk home to whatever awaits them. Not me, not this soup of lemon and leftover stock. Perhaps the television, left on since morning, the newscast too loud, never ending, perhaps a note that says I'm leaving. I've gone out and left the stove on for hours at a time, many times. Somehow, nothing's caught fire. But I know how luck is finite, quantifiable. And this knowledge is an under-the-skin feeling like being watched, like being told how lovely I look, bathed in the light of my own life, burning. I wrote that poem in my 2-room studio apartment on Eddy Street here in Missoula. Fun fact just for you all. And then this next poem is anybody who feels lightly traumatized by unsolved mysteries. Any stranger danger babies in the house? All right, stranger danger. Mist makes the trees look grim, unfamiliar. I still haven't called my mother. Are you kidnapped, she writes, or abducted? I watch children climb the hill home, content in their solitude, not fearful. Is there a difference? I write back. Also, hello, I'm alive. When I was a child and unable to sleep, she would read me The Dangers of Strangers. Pigtailed girl on the cover, red ribboned, paused at the knob behind which lurks the shadowy figure of a man. Inside, strangers with candy and vans, lost puppies. She had me recite her address and spell my last name until my lids grew heavy. Outside lurked coyotes, mostly. My older brother sneaking cigarettes behind the garage, young mouth set tight in a bleak line, squinting towards the ancient bodies of the trees, the little creek that never rose except to flood. He was a child then, as much as he ever was, maybe 13. He crept wounded through the wet woods, caught bugs. He feared nothing except being unloved. And, he says now, vans, like all vans, tinted windows. I tell him, no kidding, say, now add to that most men. We are grown, but we're still her children. And I believe now it wasn't dying we dreaded, but being drawn away from her, the woman who had known too many monsters to believe in safety, who told us their shapes as if knowing could protect us, as if anything could protect us but her. Kidnapped, she writes, is usually for ransom. I would stand a chance of getting you back. Outside, the trees loom gray over a girl stepping from the drawn mouth of a school van, unscathed, beribboned, bone-brittle branches swept down as if to hug or clutch. Abducted, she writes. No chance. Lightning suspected in deaths of horses. I want to take you to the black mud spring pasture where 6 horses fell and did not get back up. I don't know if they were dark or dappled. I wasn't there. I read it in a newspaper in Vermont, sitting at the counter of a diner that no longer exists. Lightning suspected in deaths of horses, small article in the bottom corner, not much more information than that. It struck me. I'm not trying to be funny. I carried that headline around until it became a slogan, although I'm not sure what I'd been sold. Maybe this. The sky opens. You kneel and beg its mercy, and it doesn't make one lick of difference. Or maybe light appears, and your life is transformed. Finally getting exactly what you asked for all along. A shift in luck. Sudden brilliance. Your body lit, electric. Your own, enough to let it go. I think I first drafted that poem at Cafe Dolce, R.A.P. Phil requested this poem because it's about goats. I think. Goat things. When Trish calls and reminds me that someone who gives freely and happily is called generous, I think of the man on the mountain who watches and walks with the panting band of dusty goats. His name is Sam. The goats have names like joy and compassion, intuition. One walks over here and chews a bit of sagebrush. One stares at me with horizontal pupils, useful for head-hung, hunted creatures. I'm not sure what joy is to a goat. Seeing everything? The good, tough sage leaves. I remember then a boy I knew whose family goat boxed the breath from his body with a quick kick to the chest. Not compassionate. Not compassionate. Goats do goat things, whatever those are. What are we good for? I mean, to each other, why do we do that? Cassiopeia. Meanwhile, a stranger's grandma spoons cold butterscotch pudding to her lips beside your own grandma. They prefer custard, but won't complain to the nurses. Revolutions happen elsewhere. The once beloved's face becomes unfamiliar, the mustache greasier, and it is the least you could have hoped for, but it doesn't satisfy. Your brother is doing well, because you have adjusted your definition of well. He wakes sober in a house of sober men. They eat dry toast, and he drives to the tiny Cape Cod airport to wave his arms around and drag cigarettes, the weight of himself, and duffel bags filled with souvenir driftwood and bathing suits along the tarmac all day. The vineyard people offer pinched smiles to his dropped R's, and the desire to feel another very particular way plays beneath each moment like muzak. He resists. How noble to resist. How unlike the gods. Meanwhile, the mortals are fasting. Your sister listens to the same screech on repeat and walks along the white river, seeing only the stones beneath the low, clear water, surprised by its sting when she kneels and leans to press her face against their shine. She has not cut her thighs in weeks. And you go on, not calling your brother or grandmother, crying each time you fold clothes. Elsewhere, sickness spreading is one way bodies communicate. Your mother sends a card with some money in it, says her husband is dying so slowly he seems fine. You make the same corn salad for a different set of dinner guests, put on Nebraska one more time. Meanwhile, the constellations, Cassiopeia hanging upside down from her throne, and you on earth just gawking, wondering what kind of person you are, and if you'd be the one to open up your arms when she's no longer able to hold on. We never lived in Florida. We never saw the gators long as that endless year, longing to snap us down the middle like a Kit Kat. Never saw them soaking up the hurricane on the side of 441, the prairie glutted. Suspicion and doubt never gutted us like the trout Brett never caught off the coast of Cedar Key. Nobody said it looked like he was having a religious experience, deep-fried and shirtless, head turned to the unforgiving sun, up to his waders in warm Gulf. There was no religion there, no billboards for the unborn next to billboards for the barely legal, no cartoon seal cub holding a fetus saying, "Save the baby humans." We never needed saving because that Casadega psychic never saw our auras bruised and bottle black, never said we'd jump ship within the year. We didn't. We've been here all along, watching barges move lethargic down the Ohio River, murky snake that separates us from Kentucky, birthplace of our foremothers, who never warned us about the heat down south or the way the earth sometimes opens its mouth and swallows folks in that sinking swamp which could never suck us down. Brett requested that poem, and I was like, why did you request that poem, Brett? Is it a little cameo there? Turning. So you return to the rattlesnake in the rattling old Ford, hit twice this summer and stinking of sour milk. The pines and larches pierce you to needles, their spines black and limbs spidering yellow, ballooning green and thick over the hills. It is a fine day. You feel fine, and fine spreads its gauze over the valley's deep gouge, seals it off. You can breathe in the trembling stand, can tongue fresh copper from the rip in your knee, quake. For you will be older soon, and you know you are already. And the little coins of aspen leaf are still half living, and the dead half flicks its gold on and off like ghosts at the switch, the windows of your life lit long enough for you to see them as they close. This next poem will be my last poem. Thank you so much for being such a lovely audience. And again to Phil and Natalia for reading with me. I read this poem today for you all, for the version of myself who never believed that I would be here reading this poem for you all. It's called Time Sure Flies When You're Not Living Up to Your Potential. So everything failed The jabbed iron trees flamed out in spectacular failure along the ragged range. Forecast failed. The polster that glistered turned huckster. And the memory of that ex who called you Petit Bouchon failed to reassure that you once loved, wreckful and reckless and in a foreign tongue. All around you now, Florida fails pinkly and by voracious flora. The lizard who burned or drowned hot tubbing in your hot coffee failed perfectly, curled into an eternal question mark, little fingers clenched, dukes up. If death is the body's failure, it is also its final fuck you, which has to count for something, which has to be a win. Thank you.
Yeah, if anybody wants to ask us questions, we can do that. If you don't want to do that, then we don't have to. This is up to you now. What can we do for you?
I have a question that's just percolating.
Okay, yeah.
Any questions? Yes, you, sir.
You all studied here. Where did you come from to Montana?
Yeah, so I was born in Massachusetts. So I grew up in Massachusetts and Vermont. And that is where I was living when I moved here. Yeah. Phil?
I grew up in Columbia, Missouri, which is halfway between St. Louis and Kansas City, and where Caylin now lives, working on her PhD. So a little serendipitous there. I spent a year in Nashville and 4 years in Chicago, and then came out here for school. Never left.
I'm from Montana. I grew up in a tiny little town called Emigrant, Montana, in Paradise Valley. And then I went to school here, but I didn't do an MFA. I studied German, so. Sehr gut. Ah, sprichst du Deutsch?
Ich bin nicht sehr gut in Deutsch. Duolingo.
I guess my question is, if any of you want to jump in on this, let us talk a little bit about your, I guess, kind of how you get started writing a poem, like where the beginning of that process sort of comes from for you, and what kind of pushes you over the threshold into, yeah, I'm going to write this into a poem.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I lost my pusher, I think, recently, like the little guy that pushes me over the edge. But, you know, he works on his own schedule. But usually I would say that it's just a scrap of language that I overhear and makes me, I suddenly hear it differently. And it could be something really innocuous, like time sure flies, for example. And then I just start thinking about how strange everything we do and say actually is. Kind of like saying your own name into the mirror over and over. Caylin, 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 Caylin. What is a Caylin? And then, yeah, often find myself on like etymology.com. They don't have my name. But yeah, I think for me, a lot of it starts with language itself and sound.
For me, it's usually a line or an image will come to me, whether usually if I'm like outside biking, hiking, driving, something will just kind of like tap me on the shoulder. The guy that she's talking about. Yeah, sorry. Well, he's not with me that often. Yeah, and I usually just start there. But my process is pretty quick. I can't remember the last time I mulled for weeks or months over a poem. It's like if I have the time to sit down and crank out a couple lines that started the whole thing, I'll usually get through the whole poem within less than an hour. But the initial line or image doesn't always make the final cut. It's oftentimes the springboard.
I think a lot of my poems are experientially based and inspired, where I'll just like have a little human experience where I'm like, what the heck? Wow. That's really awesome. That's like, I'm experiencing so much joy at like watching a kid feed goats through a fence and there's like sunshine behind it. And like, that's a reason to write a poem. Or like, you see two strangers kissing on the sidewalk and that's a reason to write a poem. You see moss growing through a sidewalk and you're like, that's a reason to write a poem. So I think it's a lot of just kind of like experiencing things and then needing to put to words how incredible experiencing life can be, whether that's extreme trauma or joy or really feeling pretty sad about things.
I think what the heck wow is like the is probably the summative answer for all three of us is whatever form that is. It's what the heck wow, and then you have to write a poem. Yeah. Yes. First poem versus last poem in the book or like in my life? For us, like first poem we ever read versus last poem we ever read by somebody else. Okay. Oh, I see. Okay. First poem. I think that I was writing little things that I didn't know were poems at a really young age. And yeah, I was just like such a little dramatic weirdo and would like dictate things to my dad and make him staple it into a book. And I found one of those recently, and it was just like a crayon scribble, and it said, I had told him to write underneath, "The ghost is sad." And so I feel like maybe that was the first poem. I also found like this weird scrap of paper that I taped a cardboard bouquet to and like wrote something about my mom sleeping, which was like creepy. But the first poem that I remember writing where I was like, this is a poem, I am writing a poem, was in like 4th grade. And it was about not liking school, which was a lie. Like I loved school. So yeah, just trying to fit in. And then the most recent poem that I actually wrote a poem while I was leading a workshop yesterday here. And it was really weird. I don't know if it'll ever see the light of day. It's called Bull Joy, and in it I pretend to be a bull experiencing joy. So once again, not sure if anyone's ever going to see that, but it exists.
I don't think I really enjoyed poetry until I was in college. Just high school canon was not for me. But then as a philosophy major in undergrad, I was getting burnt out on disputing things that didn't seem to be as relevant to my immediate life. And a friend turned me on to a creative writing class and realized poetry wasn't just what I had read in high school. So I started writing then. I don't remember what I wrote, and I'm kind of happy I don't remember. And I also wrote yesterday morning. I started to write my intro for Caylin, and then I got sidetracked because my Microsoft Word was open. I was like, oh, I've got an idea. And then I went back to the intro. And I haven't read it back, so it probably won't see the light of day either.
And I'll answer it too, I guess. I did this really embarrassing thing when I was a child where I would write songs alone by myself. And sing them, and I thought they were so good I would like start tearing up and cry, and then I would just start crying. So that was probably my first poem writing experience, was like 8-year-old me being like, I love my mom, and just like really, really feeling like a lot about it. And then my most recent poem I wrote last night in my like poetry group. We do these like flash poems where you have a prompt, and it was kind of a ridiculous poem because we just write it in 5 minutes, and the inspiration was the letter B. So one of the lines from it was binocular bingo, musings from the anti-glasses brigade. So that was the most recent poem I wrote.
Like it.
Anybody else? Jaron Jennings, what is your question?
Specifically, in regards to this amazing collection, you kind of noted as you were reading that a lot of the poems have been around for a long time, some of them are newer. So they come from really disparate places chronologically and geographically. And so I guess I would just like to hear you talk about what your process for assembling the poems into the collection is, if there's like a guiding principle, or like how you sort of like thread the arc throughout.
Yeah, I had a lot of trouble with that. It's kind of why it took so long, I think, for it to be a book in the world, because the poetry publishing industry is largely run on a contest model, and if you submit to a contest, even if you get close, like one, maybe two or three people are getting published out of that pool. And even if you're a finalist, semifinalist, there's no feedback mechanism built into it. And so I kept getting these bridesmaid nods where I'd be like finalist, semifinalist. And so I knew that there was something in the book, and the book kind of kept changing throughout the time that I was submitting it, because I was also like writing new poems and moving to new places. And then I put it away for a long time, and Sebastian Paramo, who is the poetry editor at Deep Vellum, reached out to me and asked if I had something, and I was like, I've got this. Is this something? And he was like, these are good poems, but like, where's the soul? There's no thread. And he told me some of the themes and resonances that he saw in it. And one of the things that he said to me was, I see a lot of strangers in this book, and I see a lot of the speaker being strange to herself, like the stranger within kind of thing. And I was like, yes, that's it. And that was kind of what set me off in running. I was then able to kind of cull from the manuscript the poems that didn't really fit that arc, revise some of the ones that could but weren't totally there in that conversation yet, into poems that were more in conversation with those themes. And then I wrote over 3 days on my Christmas break. I wrote 9 poems, 7 of which made it in to kind of round out the manuscript. So it was kind of a process of first just like living my life, writing the poems, and then trying to figure out what those poems had in common, which was the theme of movement, being a stranger in new places all of the time, having to recontextualize oneself in every new place that you go, and so thus being kind of a stranger to yourself. And then writing poems that would sort of help make all of that gel. Did that answer your question? Cool. I was like, I think I forget what it was, but yeah, I can get chatty. Yeah, any other questions? I'd also like to plug Phil's book really quick. Phil is the author of a book called Bad Summon, and it is a great book, and you can find it for sale here in Missoula and on the World Wide Web. Yeah, it won the, say it for me again.
Aga Shahid Ali. He's a really awesome poet.
Yeah, from the University of Utah Press. Yeah. So just, plug. Saying weird stuff now, so I should probably stop talking. Any other questions for me or Phil or Natalia, these wonderful poets? Thank you. Thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of the book fest.